When most people think of Jewish retirement in America, they think of New York, the delis, the synagogues, the neighborhood that never changed. But according to the Brandeis University American Jewish Population Project, Florida surpassed New York in 2023 as the state with the fastest growing Jewish population. An estimated 786,000 Jewish residents now call Florida home. 1 in 4 is over 65. These are 10 Florida towns where Jewish retirees actually thrive in 2026. Now let us begin. Number 10. On the northeastern edge of Miami-Dade County sits a city that barely existed 40 years ago, Aventura. Population roughly 37,000, incorporated only in 1995. Before that, this was swampland and horse pasture. Today, an estimated 45 to 50% of the population identifies as Jewish. The Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center serves over 1,000 member families. 5 synagogues operate within a 3-mile radius. And the commercial corridor along Biscayne Boulevard has over a dozen kosher and kosher-style restaurants. The median home price here sits at approximately $530,000 as of 2025. The high-rise condominiums that line the Intracoastal Waterway were marketed specifically to Jewish retirees from the Northeast, and they came in enormous numbers. They filled the towers, they filled the synagogues, they filled the restaurants. The Aventura Mall, the third largest shopping center in the United States, anchors the commercial life of this city. Retirees from Great Neck and Teaneck describe walking its corridors and running into people they knew from the old neighborhood. Except now, the old neighborhood has palm trees. For British viewers, imagine a purpose-built coastal development that somehow ended up with a thriving cultural identity instead of a strip of souvenir shops. That is Aventura. A city built from swampland into a Jewish retirement hub in a single generation is remarkable, but drive 20 minutes south across the causeway and you will find a barrier island whose Jewish story begins with heartbreak and ends with something that looks very much like resilience. Number 9. Surfside sits on a narrow barrier island between Miami Beach and Bal Harbour. Population roughly 5,800, a sliver of a town. You could walk its entire length in under an hour. An estimated 60 to 65% of the residents are Jewish. 3 synagogues serve this tiny community. The Shul of Bal Harbour, which borders Surfside, is one of the largest Chabad centers in the world. On June 24th, 2021, at approximately 1:20 in the morning, the Champlain Towers South condominium collapsed. 98 people were killed. Many of the victims were Jewish retirees and their families. The building housed a significant population of Latin American Jewish immigrants alongside American Jewish retirees who had lived there for decades. The collapse exposed deep questions about building inspections and aging coastal infrastructure across South Florida. Engineering reports that had warned of structural deterioration years earlier had not been acted upon. 98 people paid for that delay with their lives, but synagogues became relief centers within hours. Rabbis coordinated victim identification with families. Volunteers from every Jewish denomination in the area converged on Surfside. The community did not scatter. A memorial park now stands where the tower once was. Jewish retirees still walk to Shabbat services on Friday evenings along Collins Avenue. The town is quieter now, but the people who stayed did not stay by accident. A town that endured unimaginable loss and chose to remain is a testament to what belonging actually means. But head north along the coast into Broward County and you will find a city where the Jewish retirement population has quietly reshaped the entire identity of the place. Number 8. Hallandale Beach sits in southern Broward County. Population roughly 44,000. An estimated 30 to 35% of the population is Jewish. Historically, this was the town known for its Greyhound racing track and for being the less fashionable neighbor of Hollywood to the north. But the Jewish retirement population changed everything. At least 6 synagogues serve the city. Chabad of Hallandale Beach runs programming specifically for retired residents. The median condominium price in the beachfront corridor sits at approximately $350,000, making this one of the more affordable coastal Jewish retirement options in South Florida. What makes Hallandale Beach distinctive is the way Jewish life migrated indoors, into the condominium lobbies, into the common rooms, into the elevators where Yiddish phrases drift between floors, card games organized by congregation, a building's social committee doubling as its informal chevra, the Yiddish word for a close-knit circle. On a Friday afternoon in one of these towers, you might catch the smell of challah baking in a fifth-floor kitchen, drifting into the hallway through a door propped open with a sandal. A hand-lettered sign on the notice board announces candle lighting time. Downstairs in the community room, a minyan is forming, not because the nearest synagogue is far away, because some knees do not manage the walk any longer. So the synagogue comes to them. A city where Jewish retirees turned condominium lobbies into congregations is a quiet revolution. But travel 30 minutes north into Broward County, and you will reach a planned community that became one of the most self-contained Jewish retirement worlds in America. Number 7. Coconut Creek sits in northwest Broward County, population roughly 61,000. An estimated 25 to 30% of the population is Jewish, and within it sits Winmore Village, a gated 55 and older community with roughly 8,000 residents and its own synagogue, its own theater, its own newspaper, its own security force, and its own kosher dining options. Winmore is essentially a self-contained Jewish retirement town within a town. Residents who moved here from the Northeast in the 1980s and 90s describe it the same way, a shtetl with palm trees. The cultural programming includes Yiddish film screenings, Holocaust remembrance events, Israeli Independence Day celebrations, and a calendar of social activities so dense it rivals a small university, mahjong tournaments, book clubs reading Philip Roth and Amos Oz, a genealogy group that meets every second Tuesday to help residents trace family lines severed by the Holocaust. During the high holidays, the sound of a cantor's voice carries across the artificial lake at the center of the development. Golf carts line up outside the community synagogue on a Saturday morning. On the clubhouse bulletin board, a flyer for a trip to the Holocaust Memorial in Miami Beach sits next to an announcement for a comedy night and a sign-up sheet for water aerobics. For many of the people who live here, Winmore was not a retirement. It was a continuation. A gated community that built an entire Jewish world behind its walls is one model of how retirement works. But what happens when an entire city absorbs that energy? Head further north into Palm Beach County and you will find the answer. Number 6. Boynton Beach sits in Palm Beach County, population roughly 84,000. An estimated 30 to 35% of the population is Jewish, with higher concentrations in the western developments along Jog Road and Hagen Ranch Road. Multiple synagogues serve the city. The western corridor contains dozens of age-restricted communities. Median home prices in the retirement community sit between $300,000 and $400,000. Boynton Beach is the unsung workhorse of Jewish retirement in Florida. It lacks the name recognition of Boca Raton. It does not have the beachfront charm of Delray Beach. But for Jewish retirees on moderate pensions and Social Security income, the Western communities offer something rare: affordability within a fully developed Jewish communal infrastructure, kosher food delivery services, Jewish family services outreach for elderly residents who live alone, volunteer-run transportation to synagogue on Shabbat for those who no longer drive. The quiet reality that most coverage overlooks is this: many Jewish retirees in Florida are not wealthy. They are on fixed incomes. They watch grocery prices and medication costs and property insurance premiums with real anxiety. The communities in western Boynton Beach reflect that reality. They are not flashy, they are functional. And for thousands of Jewish retirees, they are home. A city that quietly serves Jewish retirees without headlines or glamour is easy to overlook. But the next town on this list is impossible to overlook. Its Jewish community rewrote the cultural identity of an entire stretch of coastline. Number 5. Delray Beach sits in Palm Beach County, population roughly 70,000. An estimated 35 to 40% of the population is Jewish. The city has more than a dozen synagogues. Atlantic Avenue, the main commercial strip, has multiple kosher restaurants and Jewish-owned businesses. Delray Beach was a quiet agricultural town through the mid-20th century. Pineapple farming, small shops, not much else. The transformation began in the 1970s when Jewish retirees from the Northeast started arriving. By the 1990s, the western reaches of the city had become a patchwork of age-restricted developments, each with its own clubhouse, pool, and informal congregation. The town evolved to serve this population. A thriving art scene emerged. A revitalized downtown took shape. A cultural calendar formed, shaped in significant part by its Jewish community. On a Wednesday afternoon at the Delray Beach Public Library, a room full of retired men and women attend a talk on the history of the Catskill Mountains resort era. The lecturer mentions Grossinger's. Half the room nods. Someone near the back says she worked there in 1962. Laughter ripples through the audience. And in that moment, you understand what happened here. The Catskills came south. The entire culture of Jewish leisure and community and shared memory that defined the resort towns of upstate New York packed itself into suitcases and moved to Palm Beach County. A town where the Catskills came south is a beautiful way to understand what Jewish retirees built along this coast. But the next entry is the capital of that entire migration, a city whose name has become synonymous with Jewish retirement in America. Number 4. Boca Raton, the southernmost city in Palm Beach County. Population approximately 100,000. An estimated 70.8% of residents identify as Jewish. 16 synagogues. Over 40 kosher restaurants, markets, and bakeries. One of the highest per capita Jewish populations outside of Israel. This enormous community traces back to a single family who arrived in 1931. Jewish retirees from the American Northeast moved south in waves from the 1970s onward. They brought their synagogues, their delis, their social clubs. They did not adapt to Boca Raton. Boca Raton adapted to them. For British viewers, the comparison writes itself. Just as thousands of British retirees moved to the Costa del Sol each year, American Jewish retirees built Boca Raton into a community of their own. Except here, an entire religious and cultural infrastructure came with them. You do not simply find a synagogue in Boca Raton. You choose between 16 of them. Since the pandemic, younger Orthodox families from Brooklyn and Lakewood have joined the traditional retirement population. What was once an almost exclusively elderly Jewish community has become multi-generational. Grandparents who moved here in the 1990s now live near children and grandchildren who arrived in 2021. The community is no longer just aging, it is renewing. A city where 7 in 10 residents are Jewish, and the cultural landscape reflects that identity would seem to be the pinnacle of Jewish retirement in Florida. But travel a few miles north, and you will find a community that took a different path, one built not by retirees seeking sunshine, but by families seeking safety. Number 3. Tamarac sits in northwest Broward County, population roughly 71,000. An estimated 30 to 40% of the population is Jewish. The city was founded in 1963 by developer Ken Behring, who designed it from its first plat map as a planned retirement community. But Tamarac's Jewish story has a dimension that most coverage never touches. Among the retirees who moved here from the 1970s onward was a significant concentration of Holocaust survivors. They came from New York, from New Jersey, from Connecticut. They came with their children grown and their working years behind them, and they carried something that no census form could capture. Many of the people who built these Florida retirement towns were not simply looking for warm weather. They were looking for a place where no one would question their accent or their food or why they could not sleep through the night. They were looking for a place where they could be surrounded by people who understood without being told. Tamarac was that place for thousands of them. The Holocaust Memorial at Tamarac City Hall was not built as a tourist attraction. It was built by neighbors. The annual Yom HaShoah ceremony draws hundreds of residents. In the older developments, the generation that built this community is thinning now. Fewer and fewer residents remain who can speak from personal memory of the camps and the ghettos and the long journey afterward. But their children are here, their grandchildren visit on the holidays, and in some of Tamarac's quieter corridors, the numbers on a forearm were never explained because they never needed to be. A city where survivors built their retirement was never just about the weather. But the next town on this list may be the most surprising destination in all of Florida for Jewish retirement. It is not in South Florida, it is not on any coast, and until very recently, almost no one had heard of it. Number 2. Wesley Chapel sits in Pasco County, north of Tampa. It is not a city, it is an unincorporated community, and it is one of the fastest growing places in the United States. The population has exploded from roughly 44,000 in 2010 to an estimated 100,000 in 2025. New build subdivisions stretch across what was recently cattle pasture and scrub land. From the outside, it looks like every other boom suburb in Central Florida. But something unusual is happening here. Since roughly 2018, a significant Orthodox Jewish population has been establishing itself in Wesley Chapel. Young families from Lakewood, New Jersey, and Brooklyn are relocating in large numbers. At least 3 new synagogues have been established, a kosher restaurant has opened, a mikveh has been built, Jewish day school programming has followed. The infrastructure of an Orthodox community is being assembled in real time in inland Pasco County, surrounded by Walmarts and water parks. No state income tax, housing at a fraction of Northeast prices, 4-bedroom houses with gardens, and a small nucleus of Jewish families who arrived first and began building the communal infrastructure that attracts more. This is the exact pattern that created Boca Raton 40 years ago. The retirement angle is the one most people miss, where young Orthodox families build communities, their parents and grandparents follow. The pull is not the weather, it is proximity to children and grandchildren. The same gravitational force that drew Jewish retirees from New York to Boca Raton in the 1980s is now pulling them from Brooklyn to Pasco County. Wesley Chapel may be the earliest visible signal of what Jewish retirement in Florida looks like in 2035. Not a beachfront condominium, a suburb near Tampa where your grandchildren live around the corner. An inland suburb attracting Orthodox families and their retiring parents is a story still being written. But our final destination is a place where the story has been written for decades, a place so shaped by Jewish retirement that its very name evokes an entire way of life. Number 1. Century Village at Deerfield Beach sits in northern Broward County, one of several Century Village developments built by Senville communities in the 1970s. The Deerfield Beach location has approximately 8,000 units and a population of over 15,000. An estimated 60 to 70% of residents are Jewish. Similar Century Village communities exist in West Palm Beach, Pembroke Pines, and Boca Raton. Combined, the network represents one of the largest concentrations of Jewish retirees anywhere in the world. Century Village was not built as a Jewish community. It was built as affordable retirement housing, modest units, functional common areas, a price point for people on fixed incomes who needed a place to live, not a place to impress anyone, but the Jewish population of the American Northeast found it, moved in, and transformed it into something without equivalent. The clubhouses run programming for Shabbat. The dining halls serve kosher options. The social calendar revolves around Jewish holidays. The bus to the nearest shopping center runs 6 days a week, not 7, because Saturday is Shabbat. There is no sign explaining this. There does not need to be. Israeli folk dancing on Tuesdays, a Yiddish conversation circle on Thursdays, Torah study on Wednesday mornings led by a retired rabbi from the Bronx who moved here in 1991 and has not missed a session since. The bulletin boards carry notices for bereavement support groups, for volunteer drivers to medical appointments, for collections of warm clothing to send to relatives in New York who still endure the winters. The population is aging. That is the plain truth of Century Village in 2026. The generation that built this community is now in its 80s and 90s. Some units sit empty. Some corridors are quieter than they were 10 years ago. The children of residents debate whether to sell or hold the units for their own eventual retirement. The future is uncertain in the way all places built by a single generation become uncertain when that generation begins to thin. But on a Friday evening in Deerfield Beach, none of that uncertainty is visible. The sun drops toward the low-rise rooftops. A woman in her 80s walks slowly along the path toward the clubhouse carrying a covered dish. She passes a man on a bench with a Hebrew-language newspaper on his lap. Through an open window, someone is lighting candles and murmuring the blessing. The parking lots are full. The roads are empty. For the next 25 hours, this small American retirement community will observe the Sabbath. Not because anyone enforces it, because this is who lives here. Somewhere in Century Village tonight, a woman who left Brooklyn 40 years ago is sitting in her living room. On the shelf behind her is a photograph from her wedding in 1964. On the table is a plate of rugelach her neighbor brought over this afternoon. The neighbor is from Queens. They met in the laundry room in 1989. They have had Friday dinner together almost every week since. The rugelach is still warm.